We live in an era where AAA devs more often than not make subpar to flat out terrible games, leading most gamers to rely on the indie side of the industry. Every game you purchase today is a huge gamble, no matter how good the trailers make a certain game look. Although great AAA games can be found, they are like finding a diamond amongst a pile of compost, as too many devs cut corners too frequently, which not only hurts their game's quality, but it also hurts their respected communities and fan bases. Many devs have lost originality and much prefer to play it safe to not lose money, upset their fans. One primary technique they use for this is by remaking older games. Not a new concept, but one that has become increasingly more popular as the years have gone on. They do this as they know it will bring them guaranteed money, and it's basically them saying, we have no new ideas right now, so here's a fresh coat of paint and a couple of extra missions, have fun. Now this makes it sound like I'm against remakes. I'm not. I'm just saying we can't ignore the obvious implications as to why most devs do this. Remakes also have a lot of great qualities. They can help introduce a new generation to a game that some deem outdated, allowing more people to appreciate what a game has to offer. They can also unlock a game's full potential, both through graphics and updated gameplay. Star Wars fans recently were treated to a teaser of an upcoming remake for Knights of the Old Republic. The game will be available at launch for both the PS5 and PC, so it looks like once again the Xbox has been left with hardly any promising releases. Yes, I know about that one, but besides that, there's no more. No surprise that a lot of people are excited for this, as we have been starved of any Old Republic content for a long time. Seems like fans are well and truly tired of sequel-era stories and want to relive this bit of classic Star Wars lore. I'm sure if this does great, then more remakes will almost definitely be up next. Perhaps a Republic Commando remake, maybe a Battlefront 2 remake? So many classics that could easily be brought back to life. However, when discussing fan-favourite Star Wars games, there's one that I hold close to my heart that never seems to crop up, and it's a real shame, as the game has a lot of great qualities. Star Wars Bounty Hunter, the game that let us play as the raddest, baddest bounty hunter in the galaxy, Jango Fett. The game was released in 2002, a few months after the release of Attack of the Clones. Seems like Lucas was pretty confident that fans were going to love Jango. I mean, it's not hard to love him. That killer armor, and the fact that he was played by Tamora Morrison. The Polynesian spy kind of sealed his fate as a fan favourite character, even if he was a little underwhelming in the film he appeared in. But that's what games like this are good for, giving the spotlight to a sorely underused character to flush them out, giving them a personality and motives. This is one of the first Star Wars games I can recall that actually lets you play as a villain from the franchise. It'd be great to have more games that focus on the villains, such as that Darth Maul game that got cancelled. I really hope eventually that sees the light of day. Bounty Hunter is arguably one of the most underrated Star Wars games of that golden era, and I feel like it's one that definitely deserves a remake. This game has so many concepts that if executed perfectly and given a fresh coat of paint, would make it a top tier Star Wars game for sure. So let's take a look and see why Star Wars Bounty Hunter needs a remake. Seeing as the game is called Bounty Hunter, it's fitting that you play as the most notorious bounty hunter in the galaxy, Jango Fett, a Jedi killer and eventual clone template for the Republic Army, arguably making him one of the most important characters in the entire story. This game acts as a prequel to before he became a father of 2,000 kids, with a million more well on the way, giving layers to Jango's story and how he became involved in the plot of the prequel trilogy, and became one of the most important players in the Star Wars universe. It begins with Count Dooku talking with his master Darth Sidious via hologram, but it seems his old age has caught up to Sheev as he completely mispronounces his apprentice's name.
Lord Tyrannus.
I think the Count got a severe case of second-hand embarrassment after that. Sidious instructs his apprentice to find and kill a fallen Jedi, Kamara Ivosa, who has become the leader of the Bando Gora, a dark side cult that may have been the inspiration for the Witches of Dathomir we see in the Clone Wars. Dooku then inquires about a suitable clone template for Palpatine's army, which then leads on to the introduction of Jango Fett, who is currently working a job to bring Miko to the authorities on board a spaceport. As stated earlier, the game basically sets up how Jango became buddy-buddy with Dooku, as once Jango captures Miko and meets up with his bounty informant Roz, who I might add is one of the sexiest Star Wars characters ever designed, he receives a proposition by the Count to kill Vosa for a reward of 5 million credits. The game then becomes somewhat of a detective story as you go from one criminal and location to the next, trying to uncover the mysteries of the Bando Gora and find the hiding place of Vosa. However, Fett is not the only bounty hunter on the job, as it is revealed another bounty hunter called Montross is also working this job, and him and Fett have a deep history that is revealed piece by piece over the game's duration. The story remains pretty engaging throughout the game, as it picked an interesting topic to dive deeper into. I don't think it would have been that gripping if the game was just about Jango doing random odd jobs, as it would just feel goalless and never ending. In fact, that is one of the themes of the game. Roz is constantly asking Jango to stop while he's ahead, maybe settle down, find a girl, and have a family. However, Fett always puts the job first. Eventually though, at the game's climax, once Dooku proposes his new role as a clone template, he realises he has a chance to have something worth fighting for, and so, as we all know, asks for one unaltered clone to take under his wing and show him the ways of a bounty hunter. This game really showed off the cunning and ruthless side of Fett that we never quite saw in Attack of the Clones. It was really refreshing to not play from a hero's perspective like we are usually used to. What I loved about this game's story though is that it showed that things aren't always black and white. Whereas Fett in most cases is just labelled a villain because he went against the Jedi, this game shows that Fett sometimes does the right thing and never acts immorally. Although he is a bounty hunter, he isn't outright evil. If this game were to be remade, I feel like they should just leave the story as it is, as nothing really has to be changed, so it would just be unnecessary. However, that doesn't mean they couldn't perhaps add some extra missions to make the story that little bit longer. Add all the great content you want, just don't take anything away. Actually, no, one thing that could be changed is the weird romantic tension between Jango and Zam. It's really strange the devs added this weird twist to their relationship, considering that Jango straight up murders her 10 years later. Relationship goals. Despite 2 of the prequels being out at this point, Star Wars Bounty Hunter only includes 3 characters who were introduced during that era: Count Dooku, Zam Wesell, and of course, Jango Fett. Many of the characters used in this game were completely original, except for Montrose, who made several appearances in Open Season, a Star Wars comic series depicting how Jango was recruited into a Mandalorian and became their leader for a time. The game's narrative plays out like a western. The majority of the antagonists you face are smugglers, gang leaders, and other criminals. Most of them don't have much personality, besides the typical character traits of ego and illusion. I can see why they don't have much character though, as they are essentially used as stepping stones for Jango to find and kill the actual big bad of the game, Vosa. In fact, let's focus on Vosa for a while, seeing as she is the main antagonist of the game. Settle down, Montrose, I'll get to you too. Vosa was once a Jedi Knight who fell to the dark side and became an apprentice to Count Dooku for a time, until she eventually went rogue and sought to rule the galaxy. Seems like Dooku has a preference for his apprentices: dual curved lightsabers, female, and flirty. Tyrannus, you dirty old perv. Despite being the driving force of the plot and the catalyst for Jango's role as a clone template, there isn't a lot to her character. Throughout the game, she is presented as this mysterious, all-powerful, and all-knowing entity, but it just isn't that interesting or engaging when we don't actually see any of this for ourselves. We're just told that she is this way. We don't see her do anything besides sit looking at a wall or try and get some Mando dick. She accomplishes nothing during the entirety of the game. Hell, she doesn't even kill anyone. If anything, she's pretty stupid, as even when she has Jango captive at one point, rather than kill him, she decides to keep him imprisoned and get outsmarted by Zam Wesell of all people. Force User of the Year, ladies and gentlemen. This is an appropriate segue into Zam's character. Oh boy. When Zam first appeared in the game, I was like, oh cool, I guess we'll see how they know each other in the future. But almost immediately as she was introduced, Zam really began to piss me off. It's not how she was wrote that annoyed me, it was the voice actress's performance. Everything she says sounds so sarcastic.
Blasted Fett, where are you?
It just made me think,
Yeah.
I'm Jango Fett. Who do you think you are? Zam Wesell. Yeah, I wasn't the biggest fan of hers. Moving on, let's talk about the more lovable and beautiful character, Roz. Roz is essentially the one who sends Jango on his quest, as she fixes him with numerous jobs so he can eventually locate Vosa. Throughout the game, she feeds you information, and in a sense acts as your guide through the early parts of the story, giving you hints and helping you adjust to the mechanics of the game. She is also very protective of Jango, telling him how much she worries, which is very cute, and it's also quite strange how someone as nice as Roz managed to get on the good side of Jango Fett. Of course, good things rarely last long in Star Wars, and so the game devs decide to crush yours and Jango's hearts by killing her off. So tragic, we never even got to smash. Now let's talk about the most interesting character out of the roster, in my opinion, besides Jango, Montrose. Montrose is a ruthless, bloodthirsty bounty hunter who shows no mercy towards his victims. He is notorious in the galaxy for bringing most of his targets in dead. Throughout the game, the player starts to see that there is a rivalry between Fett and Montrose. which at first you are led to believe is due to the fact that they are both successful bounty hunters, so obviously there's going to be a rivalry. But in the game, it's revealed to go much more deeper than that. I say it's revealed in the game, but if you aren't a filthy normie like myself, then you would know that their rivalry was revealed in the comic open season, where Montrose lets Jango's father figure Jasta die in order to gain control of the Mandalorians, but instead is cast out and resorts to bounty hunting to feed his murderous tendencies. Even though he is the secondary antagonist of the game, this B-plot is a lot more interesting, as instead of it being another job for Jango, it's personal to him, and there are actual stakes between the two. I mean, Montrose shows up more times than Vosa, so really it's up for debate who the primary antagonist is. Vosa is presented as a goal to reach, whilst Montrose is constantly making life hard for Jango, even going as far as to kill Roz. Okay, that was too far, bro. I can't talk about the characters of this game without bringing up the star of the show, Jango Fett. Tamora Morrison reprises his role as Jango and nails it. Seriously, this man can do no wrong.
An attack of the clones, but we're an elite force, you see, so the player can actually get to play through me. I'm the first player, and of course I've got some boys with me, 3 other guys. All
I hate this channel.
no! And the first thing you're going to find out is who's the #1 gunslinger around here. Otherwise you're dead, so.
In fact, this game has many recognisable voice talents. Corey Burton voices Count Dooku in the game, and Clone Wars fans will instantly recognise him for playing Count Dooku in that show as well. Burton is not the only Clone Wars voice actor to appear in the game. The legendary Tom Kane, who many will recognise as Yoda, Yularen, and the narrator of the show, can also be heard as the announcer commentating over the Beast match during Jango's introduction. Clancy Brown, another famous voice actor, who voices Savage Opress in the Clone Wars, is also the voice of Montrose, although to be fair, he's probably more known for the voice of The game gave much needed context to Jango and flushed out a lot of his qualities, which I previously mentioned. A major thing a remake could definitely improve is some of the characters and their overall involvement in the plot. I know before I said I wouldn't want any changes to the plot, but I think some may be necessary to get Vosa more involved somehow. She's just not threatening enough to be the main villain, and it's not like she has a good boss fight to compensate, but we'll get to that later. Obviously, being from the very early 2000s, the graphics aren't that great, let's be honest. This doesn't take away from the game at all, it's just a fact that the game looks pretty rough nowadays. For the time, they were okay, obviously, but a remake could definitely unlock some true potential. We've seen this for the teaser for KOTOR, just look how great Revan looks compared to back then. There's no competition, doesn't mean the game will be good, but hey, it's a start. The game has a lot of interesting designs for the settings of the levels you play. The game is split into 6 chapters, and each chapter takes place in a different part of the galaxy. Although the game uses locations people are familiar with, including planets like Coruscant and Tatooine, the game introduces many new and unique locations for the player to explore on their quest. For the most part, the sandboxes the player inhabits all feel different from one another, thanks to their different aesthetics, which helps keep the visuals fresh. These different styles also help with creativity when it comes to the level design. Whilst some levels can just be boiled down to narrow corridors and boxed rooms, a lot of them offer a great deal of variety and versatility. While some of the player traverse the ground, many include ledges and rooftops to utilise Jango's jetpacks. However, I will go more into that with the gameplay segment. The locations they use are also appropriate in terms of the story. Jango has to find information on a drug lord, so of course he would go to the lower levels of Coruscant where crime is rampant. Of course Jango would visit Tatooine. It's home to many notorious crime lords such as Jabba the Hutt, who probably knows plenty of useful intel. Chapter 1, as I mentioned, has you traverse a spaceport. The dirty streets, foggy air and grimy sewers conveys a sense of poverty, suggesting that you are dealing with low-level enemies. Chapter 2 starts out similarly to the first, having you look around the streets for a death stick dealer. The sky is completely dark, void of light, except for the neon signs of bars and betting houses being the only sources, letting you know that you are on Coruscant, just not the nice part. Later in the same chapter, you finally make it to the lavish part of Coruscant. Royal interior designs and expensive starships make you feel out of place, until you realise that no matter where you are in the galaxy, there will always be crime. Chapter 3 takes place in a prison inside of an asteroid. Seeing as how this prison holds some of the worst criminals in the galaxy, the compound is full of huge metal doors, rows of wall-mounted guns, and of course hundreds of cells to keep the prisoners in check. Chapter 4 drastically changes up the style, going from pretty small spaces to a rural jungle teeming with wildlife and mountains with villages embedded within them. Chapter 5 brings you to Tatooine. The game perfectly captures the nature of the planet with the dry dune seas, cramped homes, homes, and even Tuscan tents. The standout chapter for me visually was the final chapter. This was definitely the most unique chapter in terms of both visuals and scale. The ruined structures, deep mist, and toxic lakes felt like they had been ripped straight out of a horror game, which I guess is what the devs were going for, considering this planet is under the control of the final boss, Vosa. However, the effort in making these places look unique seems to vary. In the beginning chapters of the game, specifically 1 and 2, they feel very similar, and this problem of narrow corridors is rarely apparent during these parts of the game. Although it is an issue that stays throughout the game, it isn't as bad during the late game, thankfully, as it gets pretty old pretty quick. A remake could definitely tidy everything up and make these locations so much more expressive, and perhaps make these NPCs a little more expressive. Their mouths aren't even moving. Being a game centered around a skilled killer, the game is obviously going to be combat heavy. Many times throughout the game you will find yourself in a fight with enemies. Luckily for Jango, his Mandalorian training has prepared him for such occasions, so he is equipped with a vast array of weapons and gadgets to cut down his foes, as well as having his traditional pistols. He has poison darts, a flamethrower, metal rope, and jetpack rockets. The latter is probably the most important item to Jango in the game, as many of the levels are built around the ability to fly. The jetpack can be a mix of both fun and frustrating gameplay, as where in one moment you could be immersed in the role of Jango, flying high, shooting down enemies with ease. In another, you struggle to climb up a wall for half an hour because Jango has no weight to him. The controls for the game massively let it down, which is so apparent when the devs decided to make this game a semi-platformer. Honestly, probably the worst decision put into the game was having so many parts where you need to perform precise movements because the controls simply don't allow it. For a guy with Mandalorian armor, Jango is surprisingly light. He just glides with the slightest of movement, making a lot of these segments unbearable. Combat in the game also becomes very repetitive after a while because it is incredibly brainless. When the player uses the action button to shoot, Jango will automatically lock onto the nearest enemy without the player having to manually aim. This was clearly done so that small children could play the game with ease, only having to press one button over and over, but it just makes you feel like you're not really fighting, just spamming fire while the game is on autopilot. The game also lets you aim in to focus on a specific enemy, but using this is a major gamble, as if an enemy isn't close enough to you, the camera will just spin in a random direction, leaving you very disorientated. Definitely do not try this whilst you're flying, as it will lead to some bullshit deaths. If you want to, you can freely aim at your own peril, as you will die of old age before you turn to face the enemy you want to kill. And you may be thinking, it can't get any worse. Oh, but it does. The camera for this game is just the worst, constantly flipping, not to mention the fact that it often locks in place in small spaces, forcing you to look a specific way, obscuring the paths you need to take. This game is also unfairly difficult at parts. Now, some of you may think I'm complaining because I'm bad, but just hear me out. A game can be difficult and fair at the same time, although it can, of course, be frustrating when faced with difficulty. When you beat them using the rules the game has created, it feels rewarding. What isn't fun, however, is when a game uses cheap tactics to make it harder for the player to beat. Star Wars Bounty Hunter is one such game. Most enemies are fairly weak, dying fairly quickly depending on your trigger finger. The devs realised this, and rather than go back to the drawing board and make enemies harder to kill with different attack patterns or have them get into cover, they decided to just shove millions of them on your screen and give them all aimbots and the ability to shoot you without you shooting them. Such fun. Ironically, the boss fights in the game are the easiest things to beat. Hey guys, welcome back to another strategy guide. Today we're going to be tackling the bosses of Star Wars Bounty Hunter. Now the process is so complex a lot of you won't be able to comprehend its sheer genius, so you may as well click off the video now. Right, now we've got that out of the way, what you have to do is run either right or left endlessly and press square as fast as you can. You now know how to beat every boss in the game. Thanks for watching. Whilst the game does offer some fun mechanics like using your jetpack and including bonus objectives in the form of additional bounties, the terrible camera and boring combat is just awful at times. This is the area a potential remake would have to fix without a doubt. With the recent improvements in gameplay overall, I feel like this could easily be done while still keeping true to the game. Take the enemy behaviour from Jedi Fallen Order and the gunplay and flying from Star Wars Battlefront 2, and there you go, 100 times better. Thanks to the vast amount of alien races in Star Wars, games of the franchise often try to offer a large variety of enemies coming in all shapes and sizes. Star Wars Bounty Hunter has a pretty impressive variety of enemies Jango can fight. Like how I already mentioned how each chapter introduces a new location, each chapter also includes new enemies that are relevant to the location they are seen in. Eventually, as you progress throughout the game, you encounter tougher enemies like Coruscant guards, prison guards, Tusken raiders, and one of the biggest dicks in any of the Star Wars games, Nexu, the freaky looking tiger thing from Attack Attack of the Clones, with the ability in this game to leap across the map and stunlock you until you die. This game really loves its unfair enemies. As much as I appreciate the final chapter of the game for its unique look and gameplay style it incorporates into the level, their Bandogora kind of ruin it, as they just swarm you most of the time, giving you little to no breathing room or time to react, and some can even shoot you from incredibly long distances, draining your health before you can even get close enough to kill them. Whilst I'll admit a lot of the enemies were annoying, I appreciated the amount that was put into the game, as it makes the universe feel vast and expansive. Despite having one of the greatest main menu themes of any Star Wars game, Bounty Hunter's soundtrack is pretty weak. While some of the music fits a scene perfectly, capturing the sinister and ruthless undertones of certain characters, too often did the music feel completely out of place, like some of it legit sounded as if it came straight from a fairy tale.
Hey, you're forgetting my finder's fee. Oh, I'm not even counting the damage to my station. I'm just glad to be rid of that scum. But Miko wasn't the only reason I asked you to come back. A transmission came for you. It's personal. I didn't even peek.
It just sounded so whimsical and wholesome, which are two words I don't think I should be associating with a bounty hunter. I'm not saying the music was bad, but it just doesn't fit this kind of game. Maybe I'm just being too harsh on the music. I guess some people must like it. I mean, look at these two lads, they just absolutely love it. With all the talented musicians Disney have gotten on board for numerous projects, I feel like they could really do this game justice by giving it a badass new soundtrack. With the exception of the main menu theme, that work of art needs to remain untouched. In conclusion, Bounty Hunter is a flawed game. A fun game, yes, but in the end is held back by many noticeable disadvantages that stop it from being on the same level of quality as great Star Wars games like Battlefront 2, Republic Commando, and KOTOR. If this game was reimagined correctly, it could become something incredible, like Red Dead Redemption in space. Ever since LucasArts cancelled arguably one of the most interesting Star Wars game concepts, 1313, which would have had you play as Boba on the lower levels of Coruscant, this could fill that void. I mean, it's a no-brainer considering how much the fandom has got behind the return of Boba Fett after Disney redeemed the character. I think now it's time his father received the same treatment.